we do have the presence of our clerk and deputy clerk. Welcome, everyone. First order of business is our land acknowledgement statement. The Township of Hamilton is situated within the traditional territory of the Mississauga, Anishinaabe, and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nation. Our work on these lands respectively acknowledges their resilience and their long-standing contributions to the area now known as the Township of Hamilton. Item 3 on our agenda is the declaration of pecuniary interest. Is there any declarations today? Seeing none, that shall be recorded. Confirmation of the agenda. The agenda has been circulated, it's been available to us. Could I ask for a motion, please, to confirm the agenda? Moved and seconded by John, Larry. All those in favor of the motion? Carried. Thank you. Delegations and presentations. 5.1 on our agenda. Ganaraska Members Action Group, presented by Mrs. Caroline Thornton. I know we agreed to speak to each other on first name basis in conversations, but Mrs. Thornton, we're a little more formal today. So please feel free to come to the podium and proceed with your presentation.
Everybody see that? Oh, you got it on your own.
Mrs. Thornton, we do have a follow-up presentation in closed session. We do have a time restraint here. If when you get close to that, or when we sense you're getting close to that, is there any method that we could share with you to sort of?
I have a timer in front of me right here.
You're set.
Set to go. Thank you very much for inviting me today. I had actually planned to do this in December, so I have to apologize to everybody. I'm a month late, but I'm fine, and we're here now. So the first thing I'd like to tell you is a little bit about myself and my background. Apparently this doesn't like me. Not working. There we go. Thank you very much. I've been a resident living adjacent to the Ganaraska Forest for the last 20 years, but I've now moved and live in Cold Springs, which is a big up for me. It's been wonderful. I'm an equestrian member. I own a horse, and I've been a patrol rider for 20 years, which is a role like an ambassador. We look after the forest, and we help members, and we help people who might want to join the forest. We're like an informant group. And while we're in the forest, we try and keep an eye on things and report back to the staff. I also participated in the 2018-83 development of the Forest Management Plan, which is currently in place. And there were 3,100 people in the community who took place in that effort. So it was a very big community engagement to build that plan, which was approved by the board and is currently active and in place. I'm also one of the 3 founders of the Ganaraska Members Action Group. And we came together in early June of last year when we were worried about what we saw happening in the forest. And we put together a petition which asked people if they would like a review of what was happening. And we had 1,500 people log on and approve that petition in 10 days, which was pretty amazing. As a consequence of that, the group made me the spokesperson and media contact, which is why I'm here today. And I'm really here to talk to you about what we believe is a crisis in the forest. So what happened was, as I'm sure you all know, sorry, I went too fast there. Whoops, we've got everything except the page up. There we go. There was a sudden and violent windstorm which came across southern Ontario on May the 26th of last year. And one area in the forest was severely, severely damaged. It was basically catastrophically wiped out. And the staff estimated that that was approximately 600 acres of the forest that was completely destroyed. Now the forest is 12,000 acres. So although that was a devastating loss, it's only 5% of the forest. And all of you can do math. That left 95% of the forest with some damage, no question, but not devastatingly broken apart. So the GRCA at that point chose to close 100% of the forest, and nobody was allowed into it for any reason. Even the people who lived on the edge of the forest, who have traditionally walked into the forest, taken the dogs in the forest, taken their kids in the forest, had access to the forest, were told you can't go there. Nobody can go into the forest, period. So that was a kind of unexpected consequence. The staff then developed something they called an operational recovery plan, which was intended to identify the way they would restore the forest and reopen the forest to users. And the forest was announced would reopen on September 30th. So we felt that they were undertaking something valued and they would work forward successfully and everything would be fine. Unfortunately, that's not quite what happened. The GRCA staff called this an operational tool to recover the forest. And as such, they required no authorization. Nobody gave them permission to create this plan and nobody asked for the plan. There's no accountability for what is being undertaken. There was absolutely no public engagement at all with anybody. And there are dramatic changes to the approved management plan that is currently in place. So as an example, I mentioned to you already that residents are not allowed to go into the forest for any reason. It's been closed now for 8 months. And every person in future who comes to the forest must come by car. That's a completely new concept. And for the people who live there and use the forest and enjoy the forest and celebrate the forest, it seems bizarre. This is a beautiful environmental area. Why would you tell people you can only come here if you come by car? Currently, the plan says every single person drive a car to the forest, arrive in a parking lot, use the forest at their will, and then come back to the parking lot and leave in the parking lot. All other access will be closed permanently. Some areas of the forest will be closed permanently. And so the people who are influenced by this were quite disturbed because none of these things had ever been discussed in public, and none of them were expected. So the trees in the central forest, in addition, many of the trees were going to be taken down and destroyed because they had to make the parking lot bigger now that every single Salter person has to come by car. And it didn't seem logical to us, the users, that you take down trees in the forest to put cars in their place. It seemed disconcerting. The other concern we had was that if all the users are in the same parking lot at the same time, you're going to have people with children, people with dogs, people with bicycles, people with motorbikes, people with horses. These communities typically don't all come together at the same time. There seemed to be a high risk of damage or accidental harm to somebody in a context where every single member has to arrive in the same place. It just doesn't seem to make sense in the minds of the users who use the forest. In addition to that, the staff also changed some of the membership rules and they made things different than they had been. That's the page I apologize, I'm one behind. So the reality check continued as staff have changed some of the membership rules. So in some areas of the forest, they changed the age groups that could use it, and they were particularly young teenagers. And I know young teenagers can be a nuisance, but typically when they're out on bikes or hiking or taking their dog for a walk or whatever they're doing in the forest, they're not causing trouble. And so suddenly the groups that previously could do those things are now not allowed to. And there was no explanation as to why. Patrol members, I mentioned I was a patrol member, all the patrol member programs were discontinued. So the people who, quote, look after the forest are no longer going to be there. And I think that's a tragedy, but that's just my opinion. All residents adjacent to the central forest, so anybody who can go into the central forest, which is not motorized. So those are people who arrive either on foot, hikers, bird watchers, photographers. They arrive on a bicycle, but not motorized, or they arrive on horseback. Those people are banned completely because that section is 100% closed and has remained that way since May the 26th. The staff are also challenging the right-of-way rules, which have been in place since the 1940s. And what that refers to is there are municipal roads around the boundary of the forest along the edges, and they're under the auspices of certain municipalities. The one closest to us is under the auspices of Port Hope. So Port Hope has jurisdiction on that edge of the forest, if you like. And so the decision was made that nobody could either ride across, walk across, bike across, or cross any municipal right-of-way. No idea why. They've been open since the 1940s, nothing's changed, and apparently they're now going to be closed. Meanwhile, the staff have actually not just written this plan, but now are implementing it, and they currently have contractors in the forest installing barriers to prevent people going into the forest other than through the parking lot. So as we stand here today, those barriers are being built and fences are going up to close off the areas that they've designated as no longer available. And the thing that's bothered us the most so far is that there are no public events planned. There's no engagement with the forest members, no engagement with the residents, and no engagement with the community at large. And so the staff are doing something in the forest that everybody's upset about, and there's no communication channel for us to talk to them or deal with them. Although we have had several meetings and tried to have more meetings with these people to try and solve the problem. Because the goal of the members action group is to work with the GRCA to bring about a solution that will allow the forest to return to its previous use. That's our only goal, nothing more, nothing less. As a consequence of what I've told you so far, we contacted a dozen or more conservation areas, recreational parks, and forested areas, and discovered that they were using volunteers to help in their recovery, and not one single site in the province was closed completely for a prolonged period of time. Most of the facilities were up and running within 8 weeks of the storm. The concern that we have is the longer the forest is closed, the more overgrown and unattended it is. And so it's now probably in a wreck state. I can't tell you if it's been in, I'm not allowed to. But we're concerned because our group offered volunteers to go in and work in the forest, and we were told that was prohibited, wasn't allowed under any circumstances. No volunteers would be included in any effort to restore the forest. And that was a huge disappointment to the community. On September the 29th, we learned that unlike the promise, which was that the forest would open, on September the 6th, 6% of the trails were open and 94% were closed. The GRCA staff kept telling us the forest is open, and we said, yes, that's true. On the west end of the forest, which is over by Highway 35, 115, there's a small section of the forest open at the west end. There's a tiny bit open at the end of the east end. No connection between the two. So anybody who wants to go to the forest has to travel to the west end and stay there, or travel to the east end and stay there. And the central forest, which, as I mentioned, is used for non-motorized users, is completely closed. So 90% of the users cannot go to the forest at all, and have not, and still aren't, and we still don't have an opening date. That was a huge disappointment in September. The staff repeated 2 words throughout this document they have, and it's, I think if I remember correctly, it's about 25 pages. And the 2 words that occur throughout the document are the word close and restrict. The word close is close this section of the forest, close this trail, close this access, close this part. And the word restrict is limit ways of people coming to the forest to 2 places, 2 different parking lots. If they're not coming through those 2 parking lots, they can't come in. And it's just a sad situation because all the people who love the forest and all the users and the community members and the residents just want to do what they did before. There's no reason, there's no rationale to change the entire forest based on one storm. To this day, there is no opening date announced for the full opening of the forest. The claim is that the closure is for safety reasons, but many areas of the forest were untouched and they're just as safe today as they were before the storm. And as I just said, what we really want is to resume the activity in this very special form. And I'd just like to add to that, all of you know, post-COVID, that there's been a huge effort around mental health and well-being and getting people out into nature and getting them into fresh air and getting them exposed to community activities. The Ganaraska Forest is one of the most beautiful places on earth to be. And the fact that it has been closed for now 8 months is a tragedy. And at a time when we all need physical well-being and mental health and a good place to be, we feel strongly that people are being denied an opportunity to be healthy. So the last page I'd like to talk to you about is the next steps. Which I'll just skim through these. Okay. There's a newly formed GRCA board. Of course, you know that. Mark is on it. And they must take their governance role seriously. Rules of process and procedures must be followed. There's a huge amount of frustration, I guess is a good word, that all of this event, the ORP, the plan that was put in place, was done in private. There was no conversation with the members, no conversation with the community, no conversation with the board, no conversation with anybody. And so it was It was kind of like this hidden event going on in the background. So we believe that the GRCA needs to establish a more formal, frequent, and informative communication strategy for the members in the forest, the residents of the area, and the public at large. There is every opportunity to improve the communication. We also believe that offers of help and engagement from the community should be welcomed, encouraged, and appreciated. Currently, every time a group has gone to the GRCA and said, let us help you, the answer is no, you can't go in the forest, you can't help us, we won't use you, we don't need you, we don't want you, please stay away. And that's just hurting a lot of people's feelings. And finally, there have to be ongoing public interactions and ways for the GRCA to work openly and honestly with the members of the RUC, which is the Recreational User Committee. All the user groups are represented there, with residents who own property in this area, and with members of the public who support and enjoy the forest. If those things happened, we believe that we could resolve everything. Our goal is to work with the GRCA to restore the forest to its previous state. And I hope that was clear. I'm finished. Questions? Yeah. Yes, Mr. Williamson.
Just to clarify, are you saying you want to return it to its original state, but also its original use?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. The mandate of the GRCA has two different aspects. One is the environmental aspects, which is to manage the environment and to look after the water flow and the other aspects of all the environmental care of the forest. And the other is to provide recreational uses and environment in which they can participate. Those two priorities are in the existing management plan parallel, they're equal. In the new world, one of them is taking priority and the other one is being forgotten. And that's our concern. Thank you for asking such a very well-pointed question.
Have you discussed this with David Piccini, our member of parliament?
Yes, we have.
Responsible for parks.
Yes, interestingly, Bill 23 is going to change some of the rules and guidelines around how conservation areas work. And as you may well know, it's kind of currently in kind of a controversial state. Some people love it, some people hate it. It hasn't been implemented yet. So when Bill 23 is implemented, it will change the way the GRCA operates. But we don't know if it's going to be implemented in full or in part. And David Piccini's office is helping us, is working with us. But there's also been a split of the GRC. As it is now, it reports to, what is it, Ministry of something, forgotten, sorry, there's so many of them, but they specific part now. One half reports to the Ministry of Forestry and the other stays with David Piccini's area. So yes, we are working with David and his staff.
Thank you there. John? Thank you. I'll look over here.
No
Bruce, any questions or comments?
We would like a public meeting at which, in fact, we would like to actually hold a meeting at which the GRCA board members are there, the GRCA staff is there, the heads of the user groups are there, and the members can come and ask, members and residents can come and ask questions. We've asked for that and we've been told that they were too busy doing the cleanup to get that done at the time. Maybe they're not too busy now, I don't know. But we have met privately with staff, we've met with the board. We have done everything we can to make our position clear. And so far,
Anything further, Bruce? Mark, questions or comments?
I originally had a number of pages to contradict some of what was said here. I mean, there's two sides to every story, and in this instant, we're hearing one side of it. I can say that the staff has worked diligently and very hard to get the forest open again to all users. You have to remember that the part of the forest that went down, unfortunately, was the part where all the entrances are pretty much to the trails where they link and so forth. So unfortunately, that was one issue. But a second issue arises when every year we tender out so much to be removed as far as timber and so forth. Well, unfortunately, when that tender was given, that was given before the storm and so forth was given at budget time a year ago. And that particular area was also part right close to where the trails are and so forth, which would have closed some of the trails regardless, because when you have timber removal, that particular area is now owned by the people that are removing the timber. So some of that compounded some of the issue. Some of the other issues that come to mind here are, you know, the use of volunteers and so forth. We can't just allow anyone from the public with chainsaws and so forth to do tree removal. We just can't do that. I mean, liability, anyone got hurt out there. I mean, how would you even find them out there? I mean, it would be very, very difficult. So you have to have something that it's just not feasible to do that. I mean, you can't send an ambulance to the forest and because the forest is so big, so you have to know where to send them. So there's some issue there. But end result is, I mean, I think what you want and what we want in the end is going to be what's going to happen. I met with staff approximately a little over a month ago, I guess, and the goal is to have all the trails back to the way they were before the storm by May 1st. So that's the goal. That's where we're heading towards. That is what I've been told we're going to have happen. They've guaranteed me 95% will be open to the way they were. As far as access points go, you've mentioned those within your presentation. Those are going to remain the same for now. Staff are going to, the main goal will be to open the trails. Second goal will be to get those access points open. Some of those may close because there is other, it's not just the GRCA that controls that. That may be controlled by some of those municipalities that are involved. So they are going to try and keep any of those access points that were there before open again. So those people that have been riding from their property to the GRCA are hopefully going to have those access points open. We're going to do everything we can to try and keep those so that you'll be able, so you'll get that. That's the goal, so that you know that, Carol. That is 100% the goal of staff, and that's.
Why are they building permanent barricades?
That's not going to happen. I'm going to find that out today when I go there today. I'm actually going there to sign checks and so forth after I leave here today. So I'm going to ask that question today. But the goal is to have those access points that you've had before and enjoyed before opened again,
Well,
and
that's
the
huge
trails.
Huge.
So the trails, you can write that down in the minutes today that we hope to have at least 95% of those open May 1st.
Well, that's an enormous change.
So those
That's
are.
true. So thank you for that. Can I make a very quick response to these first 2 points? Very quick. So about volunteers, I've had this conversation several times with the staff. The truth is, volunteers were used in every other situation across the province. So they found a way to use volunteers. And they also finish their cleanups typically in 6 to 8 weeks. Here we are at 8 months. And what we believe could have and should have happened was if the volunteers had been accepted, they would go with a staff member to manage them into areas that needed minor cleanup, and they would start cleaning up those areas and getting that done in parallel with the main work. So that didn't happen, and that was another source of activation. And just last point, logging. Logging has gone on in that forest every year since I've lived there, 20 years. So every year, certain areas are cordoned off for logging. Everybody knows that. Everybody gets it. They just steer clear of it. But to close 11,500 acres because there's logging in one place or two is not reasonable. And the concern that we have is that a lot of the things that have happened just seem illogical. And we've never, until today, been able to present that illogical component. And your comment comes out of the blue, and hallelujah, thank God, I couldn't be more thrilled. I would be dancing.
It's always been the goal of staff to do that. I just think it somehow got miscommunicated.
The word open
you.
doesn't exist in that plan. You can go down, the ORP, 25 pages, the word open does not exist in that plan.
The plan,
Okay. All right.
can I just clarify a couple other things, Scott, if I may, Mr. Mayor? The plan that staff put forward was actually from the consultations and so forth that were brought forward from the public back in, I believe, 2018. So that's where some of that information comes from. I'm not saying all of it, but some of it does. Some of it got compounded a little bit because of the storm and so forth. So but that's all been put on hold for now. Any of that plan that you heard from the staff plan that was put forward, that's all being put on hold for now. Number one
What do you
thing,
mean about the ORP?
I'm talking about the ORP. It's
The
put,
ORP is on hold.
that's on hold until we get, yeah, because I mentioned when the last presenter was in, what we're going to do is we're going to open the trails. That's number one goal. 95, at least 95% open May 1st. That's number one goal. Number two goal is to try and keep as many access points open as we can.
Okay, I'm
That's
going to
number
go and
two.
spread that to the community
That-
today.
That's fine.
Mark
It's in,
Lushing
it's
said-
in the minutes here today.
Perfect.
And the third goal will be to have public consultation when we have to have those closures. So there will be some that may need to be closed.
All of
Not
this is
all,
for you.
but some. So that's
Thank
the third goal.
Very exciting. And my last comment would be, if any of you ever want to tour the forest, please get in touch with me. That has my contact information. I would be thrilled and delighted to take you to a trip in the forest. If you know how to ride a horse, I'll put run horseback into it.
You have a request for one more question? And we need to close this out very quickly. Larry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to mark, what is the difference between the Ganaraska Forest and the Cumberland Forest?
Size
Because
is one of the biggest things there. I mean, we do have a recreational committee there also that reports to the board. They do that monthly. And we also have staff that report to them on some of those changes. And that's where that report got put out. And really it's,
The RUC and Ganaraska meets 4 times a year.
yes, at least 4 times. If there's more need, they will, but at least 4 times we try. And it's hard because you're getting user groups from all different committees and so forth, trying to meet at once. COVID probably helped that because some of them were able to meet on a computer and so forth. So that may have helped a lot of that.
Okay, so they're so separate and not to be part of the same entity.
Okay, I'm going to close this
Okay,
out in light
thank
of
you.
time. I'm going to close this out. Thank you, Mrs. Thornton. And quick summary, it seems as though there's a lot more common ground and a lot more common goals here than we maybe realized when we started today. Once again, thank you. And thank you to council members for their questions. We're actually moving to getting a motion to receive. Moved by Bruce, seconded by Mark. All those in favor? Thank you. Now we'll move to closed session. And I have a prepared motion that I'll read and then ask for the mover and seconder. And then we will hesitate while we make the adjustments to do so. It is recommended that council, the corporation, the township of Hamilton enacts as follows. That the committee of the whole meeting held on January 10th, 23, move into closed session at 1:28 p.m. under the Municipal Act, section 239, 3.1. And now we'll hesitate. Our door is closed. We'll hesitate while we're getting off of YouTube. Oh, mover. Moved by Mark, seconded by Larry. All those in favor? Thank you.